There is a kind of intelligence that school never teaches you. Not the kind measured by grades or degrees. Not the kind that earns you praise in a room full of people who already agree with you. This is something older, sharper, and far more uncomfortable to look at directly. It is the intelligence of someone who understands how the world actually works, not how we were told it works, not how we wish it worked, but the raw, unvarnished mechanics underneath everything. And here is the question that this video is really asking. What separates the people who move through life clearly, who build power, avoid manipulation, and make decisions that actually serve them, from the people who stay confused, taken advantage of, and perpetually one step behind? The answer is not talent. It is not luck. It is a specific kind of ruthless clarity about human nature that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Because avoiding it is comfortable. Because looking at the world honestly requires you to also look at yourself honestly, and that is a price many people are quietly unwilling to pay. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this. 500 years ago, he wrote things that made people deeply uncomfortable, not because they were wrong, but because they were true. He was not a villain. He was an observer. A man who watched power operate in real time, who studied how humans actually behave when stakes are high and appearances are managed, and who had the rare honesty to write down what he saw without dressing it up in comfortable illusions. People have misread him for centuries. They see the calculated advice and assume the goal is domination. But Machiavelli was not writing a manual for tyrants. He was writing a map of reality for anyone willing to read it clearly. And the people who have genuinely absorbed the intelligence underneath his reputation, move through the world with a kind of calm authority that is difficult to explain until you understand where it comes from. What follows are 8 lessons drawn from that tradition. Not lessons in cruelty. Lessons in clarity. And there is a difference, even if the line between them is thinner than most people would like to admit. The first lesson is this: most people are not thinking about you the way you think they are. You spend enormous energy managing how you are perceived. Worrying about what someone thought when you said that thing, rehearsing conversations before they happen, editing yourself in real time to avoid judgment. And all of this happens because somewhere inside you is the belief that other people are watching you as closely as you are watching yourself. They are not. Everyone is the main character of their own story. Every person you interact with is primarily occupied with their own anxieties, their own ambitions, their own performance. The moment you left the room, they moved on. The comment you've been replaying for 3 days has already been forgotten by the person who made it. The freedom this should give you is immense, and the dangerously smart person has already claimed it. They move with a lightness that others mistake for confidence. It isn't confidence. It is simply the absence of a burden that was never real. When you stop performing for an imaginary audience, you get your energy back. And energy, directed well, is the beginning of everything. The second lesson is harder. People tell you who they are through their patterns, not their words. You have been in a situation where someone showed you exactly who they were, through a behavior, a choice, a moment of pressure, and you explained it away. You built a story around why that moment was the exception. Why this time was different. Why they didn't really mean it. And then the pattern continued, and you were surprised. Machiavelli was not surprised by human inconsistency. He expected it. He understood that people act from their nature far more consistently than they act from their stated intentions. Words are cheap to produce and easy to shape. Behavior under pressure is neither. The dangerously smart person watches actions. They track patterns over time. They give less weight to apologies and more weight to what happens after the apology. They don't assume the worst, but they remember what they've seen, and they let what they've seen inform what they expect. This is not cynicism. This is pattern recognition. And it is one of the most protective forms of intelligence you can develop. Because the people who burned you rarely surprised you, you simply chose not to believe what they had already shown you. The third lesson lives in silence. There is a compulsion most people have to fill space with words. To explain themselves when they don't need to. To over-justify decisions. To give more information than was asked for, as if volume of explanation signals honesty or competence. It does neither. What it actually signals is anxiety, the need to be understood, approved of, validated in real time. The person who speaks less forces others to interpret them. Silence creates projection, the other person fills the quiet with their own assumptions, and in doing so, they often reveal far more about themselves than you would have learned by speaking. Watch what someone says when they're filling silence you didn't feel the need to fill. You will learn more in those unguarded moments than in hours of intentional conversation. Machiavelli understood that information is a resource, and the person who controls what they reveal controls the dynamic. The dangerously smart person is comfortable being partially understood. They have learned that mystery is not a barrier to connection, it is often the source of it. And more practically, they understand that once words leave your mouth, you cannot retrieve them. Restraint is not repression. It is strategy dressed as composure. The fourth lesson is one that will cost you something to accept. Intention means nothing without execution. You have good values. You mean well. You want the right things. And none of that matters, not to outcomes, not to results, not to the world around you, if it doesn't translate into what you actually do. The road between good intentions and good outcomes is full of people who never made the crossing. People who were kind in their hearts and passive in their actions. Who cared deeply but moved slowly. Who understood what needed to be done and waited for the perfect moment that never arrived. The perfect moment never arrives. It is manufactured by people who decide to move anyway. Machiavelli was obsessed with the gap between virtue as an idea and virtue as a practice. He had little patience for people who were good in theory while being ineffective in reality. The dangerously smart person holds themselves to the standard of their outcomes, not their intentions. They ask not, did I mean well, but did it work? And when the answer is no, they adjust without ego, because the goal was always the result, not the self-image. The fifth lesson cuts even deeper. Not everyone deserves your transparency. You have been raised, in all likelihood, to see openness as a virtue. Honesty is valued. Vulnerability is celebrated. And in the right contexts, with the right people, it is genuinely powerful and necessary. But the dangerously smart person understands that transparency given indiscriminately is not virtue, it is exposure. There are people in your life who will use what you share against you. Not always out of malice. Sometimes simply because information is power and humans are self-interested creatures who act accordingly. Your fears, once spoken aloud to the wrong person, become leverage. Your insecurities, once visible, become handles. Your plans, shared too early with the wrong audience, become targets. Machiavelli advised his prince to keep his own counsel, not to deceive necessarily, but to understand that what you reveal shapes what others can do to you. The wise person learns to distinguish between intimacy that strengthens and oversharing that weakens. They give trust in proportion to what has been earned, not in proportion to how much they want to be accepted. Because the desire to be known, to be fully seen and still loved, is one of the most human hungers there is. And it is precisely that hunger that makes premature vulnerability so easy to exploit. The sixth lesson is about conflict, and why avoiding it is one of the most dangerous habits you can have. Conflict avoidance feels like kindness. It feels like keeping the peace, preserving relationships, choosing harmony over friction. For a while, it even works. The tension stays below the surface. The relationship continues. Everything appears fine. But appearances are not reality. And Machiavelli identified something that modern psychology has since confirmed: small conflicts avoided become large conflicts inevitable. The problem you do not address at its beginning will not stay small. It will grow in the dark, feeding on silence, distorting over time, until it erupts in a form far more destructive than the honest conversation you were afraid to have 6 months ago. Think about every relationship that ended badly, personal or professional. In almost every case, there was a moment early on where something could have been said. A misalignment that could have been named. A boundary that could have been drawn before it was crossed so many times it disappeared entirely. The dangerously smart person has learned to tolerate the discomfort of early friction. They say the difficult thing when it is still small and addressable. They correct misalignments before they calcify into resentment. They understand that the momentary discomfort of an honest confrontation is almost always preferable to the long, slow damage of an avoided one. This is not aggression. This is the intelligence of someone who understands that clarity, delivered with care, is one of the deepest forms of respect you can offer another person. The seventh lesson will be misunderstood by anyone who reads it too quickly. Choose your loyalties based on alignment, not affection. This sounds cold. It is meant to be precise. Machiavelli watched leaders fall not because they were betrayed by enemies, but because they were failed by allies they had chosen based on warmth rather than substance. The person who makes you feel good and the person who will actually be there when it costs them something are often not the same person. The dangerously smart person does not love less. They love more carefully. They observe who shows up consistently. Who keeps their commitments when it's inconvenient. Who tells them difficult truths rather than comfortable ones. Who stays when the association no longer has obvious benefits. Who is honest with them even when honesty creates friction. These are the people worth investing in deeply, not the people who are simply pleasant to be around when everything is easy. Pleasantness is easy. Reliability under pressure is rare. And rarity is what deserves loyalty in return. The people who are truly in your corner are a small group. The dangerously smart person knows exactly who they are, and invests accordingly, without guilt about the investment they choose not to make elsewhere. The eighth lesson is the one that brings all the others together. You will be tested by what you do when no one is watching, when the right thing is inconvenient, when power is briefly in your hands and misusing it would cost you nothing visible. This is not when your character is formed, it was already formed long before this moment. This is simply when it is revealed. Machiavelli has a reputation for teaching manipulation. But his deeper lesson, the one that survives underneath the political calculations, is about self-knowledge. The most dangerous thing you can be, in the most constructive sense of the word, is someone who knows themselves without illusion. Who understands their own motives honestly enough to separate what they actually want from what they tell themselves they want. Who can sit with the uncomfortable question of why they made a decision and not flinch from the true answer. Because the gap between who you are and who you think you are is exactly where manipulation enters. It is where self-deception lives. It is where the stories you tell yourself about your own goodness allow you to behave in ways that contradict it, because you're too busy maintaining the story to notice the behavior. The person who knows themselves this fully cannot easily be manipulated, because manipulation almost always works through that gap. Close it, and the lever has nothing to push against. Know your fears before someone else uses them. Know your ego before someone else flatters it. Know your blind spots before someone else navigates them around you. So here is the answer to what we began with. What separates the people who move through life with dangerous clarity from the people who stay confused and outpaced? It is not cruelty. It is not coldness. It is the willingness to see things clearly when seeing clearly is uncomfortable. To act from reality instead of wishful thinking. To hold themselves to outcomes rather than intentions. To give their trust based on what has been earned rather than what has been promised. To address what is difficult before it becomes what is devastating. Machiavelli was not teaching people how to become ruthless. He was teaching people how to stop being naive. And those two things are not the same, even though they are easily confused, and even though the people who benefit most from your naivety would very much prefer you to keep believing they are. The most powerful version of you is not the one who finally learns to trust no one, feel nothing, and move through the world like a piece of machinery. The most powerful version of you is the one who sees clearly, chooses wisely, acts decisively, and does all of it while remaining fully human. Dangerous intelligence was never about losing your humanity. It was always about knowing it well enough, understanding it deeply enough, to stop letting it be used against you. That is not a cold way to live. That is the only honest one. Share.